All right, so I promise you guys we'll have some examples of these teamwork exercises. So I'm going to show you guys how I would go about describing this image. Now make sure you remember the things we learned in the last video. So I'll go through the entire process. I don't think I'll do this in just 8 minutes because I want to just show you guys mainly how I would describe some of the weird things I've drawn in this image. So I might just take a little bit longer, but really we're just trying to look at the ways we can describe certain complicated objects. These things seem really difficult, but maybe we can make them simpler when we're actually describing this to someone else. So we sit down in the room. I'll say, hello, my name is Course Grinder. What we have to do is I have an image in front of me and I'm going to give you a series of simple instructions in order to allow you to replicate this image. Now, which utensils do you have in front of you so I can see, what's the most efficient way we can accomplish this task? We'll have the other person say, I just have a piece of paper and a pencil. Okay, that's awesome. Well, we'll come up with a plan of action to ensure that we can be as efficient as possible. I'll give you one instruction, and when I'm done, I'll say the word done, and then you can draw that object or whatever I described. Once you're finished, you can say next, and I'll give you the next clue. Is that okay? Or I guess clue is a bad word. Next instruction, you'll say, is that okay? They can agree to it, or you can develop the plan a little bit. And then you'll go on to the next clue. If any point during this process you don't understand something or you're confused by an instruction, let me know and I'll give you a better instruction, or we can work together to move through this. And you can say, is that okay? And he says yes, and then we can get started. So that's how I would do the introduction. Now, we're looking at this here, right? We're going to assume that this is going to be landscape. So one thing we'll have to start off is mentioning that the page needs to be orientated landscape. So they're going to have to turn their page landscape. So you'll tell the other person, we'll start up by turning the piece of paper landscape. Do you understand what that means? It might seem a little bit weird to ask that, but you want to make sure that by each step they're following along and they understand. Remember, it's very difficult to understand what you have in front of you and understand what we're going to be doing when you just have a blank piece of paper, right? For you, it looks simple because you have the answer key in front of you. You have this final product here. They don't have that. So make sure you keep that in mind. They really don't know what's going on. So you'll say, okay, I have a bunch of different shapes or different letters and numbers all around. So we're going to go through this process. I'll give you some instructions and we'll be able to complete this. Now we have our page set landscape. I'm going to want you to divide this into 4 quadrants. You understand what quadrants are? They'll say yes. You'll say, all right, I want you to put a line, a horizontal line. So we have this horizontal line right over here. Horizontal line dividing the page in 2, so right down the middle. And I'll do the same one, a vertical line right down the middle as well. So they'll have one, roughly down the middle. The actual proportions of whether or not they get it down the middle does not necessarily matter. They're not, they're looking more relative rather than the actual exact in terms of sizes. So don't worry too much about sizes. I probably should have mentioned that in the previous video. So they'll have this whole page divided into quadrants. So wait for them to say it's okay. And now you'll see which one do you think is the best for us to start with. It's probably better to start with something simple so you can build up your confidence. Well, I think this one down here is the easiest one. So you'll say, all right, I want you to go to the bottom right quadrant, right? So we'll have our quadrants up here. This will be top left. This will be top right, this will be bottom left, and this will be bottom right. So I say, I want you to go to the bottom right quadrant, right? I'm not saying done after each clue because I'm just really going to show you guys how we can describe some of these objects, but you assume that I'd be saying done and the other person would be responding and saying next. So you'll say, I want you to draw a circle in the middle of this quadrant. Now for these big main shapes, maybe you can give a small indication on how big you want this to be. You can say that you want it to take up, roughly, 30% of the area, or you can say that you want to take, if you want to, the best way to go about this, you can say that, the height of it'll take up, say, about 70% of the height and maybe 33% of the width. But that's a little bit too detailed, right? So I would just say draw one in the middle and it could take up about, say, 30% or 1/3 of the total area. I think that'd be the best way to say. Going with the dimensions gets a little bit confusing. So let's stick with that last one. You'll say draw a circle that's going to be 33% or 1/3 of the space we have in here. So they'll have a little idea that they're going to draw something that's going to be about the size, right? About 30%, 1/3. I'll go ahead and do a highlight over here so I know exactly what I've described. So this will be the green that you're going to see. The green ink is going to be what the other person would be writing. So I guess they would have this as well. They would have this up here, and they would have one right over here. There we go. So they would have that already done. Now you're going to say, I'm going to have a bunch of letters around and inside of this circle. So let's start off with the inside. We're going to have one letter. And in the middle, I'm going to want you to write the letter S. So I can go ahead and say, okay, let's see in the middle. I'll go ahead and write the letter S. You know, when it comes down to these details, I wouldn't be too concerned with the size. If they ask you how big it is, you can say, you know, it's going to take up 1/3 of the height. So, you know, in terms of the height here, you know, 1/3 like that. If you want to visualize like that, you know, it could be getting into in detailed. So if you don't want to confuse them, you can leave that information out and you won't be penalized for that. So say I want the letter S inside of it. Now I want to think of the outside like a clock, right? At 12 o'clock, if you understand what that means, you make sure they understand. You'll say at the 12 o'clock position on top of the circle, I want you to write the letter P. Then you'll say at 3 o'clock on the right-hand side of the circle, I want you to write the letter Q. And remember, this is going to be the capital letter Q and not the lowercase. You can say that for P as well, but you know, the capital and lowercase P in this case, they look the same. Then you'll say, okay, at the bottom or the 6 o'clock position of the circle, I want to go with the letter N. You go ahead and write the letter N there, capital N, and you'll say, there we go, we have completed this quadrant of the exercise. So that's one thing to also consider, right? If you have to deal with circles, right, or writing things around a circle, you can think of how a clock works and make sure they understand what you mean when you start talking about the clock, right? If they understand using, you know, the hours in the clock to indicate which part of the circle you want to write things, that's something you can also help. If you were to have things here like the other positions here where it's just not the main compass positions, then you could also, that's when having the clock thing would help, right? If you had, say, another letter over here, for example, then you'd, you know, be kind of hard to say, you know, north, east, right? It'd be a bit, you know, ambiguous, but you can use that as well. So little things you can use as long as the other person understands what's going on. So let's say next we're going to go ahead and we're going to move to the bottom left quadrant. So go down here to the bottom left quadrant, and you're going to say, I want you to start off by drawing an equilateral triangle. Now we see we have this weird shape over here, right? It's a little bit of a pyramid that's divided into these different compartments. You want to start up by simplifying it, right? We see we have this triangle here, right? So rather than going ahead and making things complicated, say, look, I see this equilateral triangle here. I want you to draw an equilateral triangle, which is going to take up a similar amount of space as the circle that we just drew over there. So go ahead and draw an equilateral triangle. Make sure they understand what an equilateral triangle is. Always making sure that you ask them, making sure that they're not being confused, and just ensuring that, you know, just the fact that you're showing that you don't want to leave this person behind and you don't want to just give all these clues right away and then they're going to get lost. That's going to buy you a lot of marks with the interviewer. So we have all that here. Now you'll say, I'm going to go ahead and I want you to divide this triangle up, right? We're going to draw I guess I should say 3. We're going to divide this into 4 compartments with 3 horizontal lines. So I want you to go ahead and draw 3 horizontal lines inside. So say, okay, I'll draw one horizontal line here, one over here, and one over here. So we'll create these compartments. You can say that I want these horizontal lines to be equally spaced out when looking at, you know, vertical space between them. So you can say I want vertical space between them to be similar, and you'll have this design over here. You could say, look, this looks like a food pyramid, right? You know, when you're looking at you know, how many portions of food you should have. There's the food guide pyramid. We all know the ones which shows you have your meat and alternatives, your dairy, your cereals and wheat and all of those things, and vegetables. You know, we all know how much. And that's what it looks like. It looks like the food pyramid. So you can use that as an example to maybe help them out to visualize what this should look like. We have the clock example over here. We have a food pyramid example over here. Maybe they don't understand what it means. So if they say they don't understand, we can just say, okay, we can forget about that clue. You don't want to give them information or force information that they don't understand. So we have this triangle over here. Now you'll say, I want you to go to the third compartment, right? Counting from the top to the bottom. So 1, 2, 3. And I want you to draw a vertical line down the center. So draw a vertical line down the center to divide it into compartments. Now in the left compartment on this third row, I want you to go ahead and write the capital letter T. So go write the capital letter T. And then I'll say, I want you to go up one compartment to the second compartment from the top. And I want you to go ahead and write the letter V. We'll go ahead and write the letter V. There you go. You're doing a great job. We finished 2 of the quadrants. We have 2 left. Now we'll say we're going to go to the top left-hand quadrant. So we're going to go up here. We see we have this, weird shape over here. This one looks really confusing, but what's the biggest, most simplistic way we can start off with this? Well, we see we have a square. So you can say, I want you to start up by drawing a square. Roughly the same amount of area will be taken up as the other shapes we've designed. So they have an idea. You've already described it once of how much area you want. You don't have to go ahead and describe it again because they can already see the other shapes they've drawn and they can, replicate that rough area when they're going ahead and draw these other shapes over here. So we have this other square we've driven over here. Now you can go ahead, and another tip we can do is you can tell them where to put their pen, right, to make things a little bit easier. You can go ahead and say, I want you to put your pen on the top left-hand side of this square. So they're going to go ahead and put their pencil or the pen right over here. Now you're going to say, I want you to draw a diagonal line to the other side of the square, right, to the bottom right hand side of the square. Do you understand? They'll say yes. They'll draw a diagonal line just like that to divide it into these two parts. Now you can say, I want you to take your pencil and I want you to put it at the top right hand side of the square, and I want you to draw another diagonal line, but this one is only going to go up to the first diagonal line that we just drew. We're not going to go ahead and bring it to the other corner. Do you understand? They'll say yes, and they'll go ahead and divide it like that. Well, now you can say, now we see that we have these three different compartments inside of this square. I want you to go ahead and look at the right hand triangle that we have that's dividing up this square, right? We see we have one that's on the top, we have a big one on the bottom, and we have one here on the right. You see the one on the right? They'll say yes. You'll say, I want you to go ahead and write the number 27 inside of this quadrant, or inside of this little compartment. So go ahead and write the number 27, just like that. And you'll say, I want you to put one more detail inside of this square. We see we have the big compartment, right? The one that wasn't divided by the second diagonal line. They'll say yes. You have this over here. You'll say, I want you to draw an equilateral triangle inside of that quadrant. So they'll go ahead and draw a little equilateral triangle over here. And you'll say, one last detail, I promise, we'll have the letter S. So I guess it looks like the number 5. We'll go with number 5 because we already have letter S over here to change things up. I want you to draw the number 5 inside there. Obviously, you won't say the part of changing things up. That was just me saying that. It's not something you'll be telling the person you're doing this activity with. And you'll say, good job. We have completed 3 of the 4 quadrants. We only have 1 left. Now, I mean, even if you only accomplished up to here so far, that was pretty successful, right? So don't worry about actually completing the entire thing. It helps to complete the entire process, but it's not entirely mandatory. So you say, okay, we're going to head to the last quadrant, which is the top right hand quadrant over here, and I see that we have a weird structure over here. But what's the easiest way that we can go ahead and look at this? Well, I see a cylinder, right? The cylinder is at the heart of this thing. If we have a bunch of different objects built off each other, see which one's at the center, which is going to be the one that you want them to build first, and then you can allow them to build these other objects off of it. So you can say, I want you to draw a cylinder, right? We know that this cylinder is going to be 3-dimensional, and this is going to be a vertical cylinder. Now I want you to draw the part that's going to show that this cylinder is circular, right? The part that's going to look 3-dimensional. Do you know what I mean when I say that? I'm going to want you to draw that at the top. And remember, this is going to be a vertical cylinder. So remember, make sure you tell them where exactly this little cap part's going to be. And that's going to help them understand exactly what you want to draw in this case, if we have to draw a cylinder, for example. So this is the case of having a 3-dimensional object to draw. Make sure you let them know which part or which direction the 3-dimensional part will be facing. Now you go ahead and say, tell them to complete the cylinder. And now we have that central object, design. Now we can build off it. You'll tell them, I'm going to have you guys draw 2 more shapes. You're going to have 2 shapes built off of this cylinder. I want you to go to the left hand side of the cylinder, right? So the left hand over here, and I want you to bring your pencil about 20% down the cylinder, right? So if you want to get specific, you can go ahead and put that right over here. And I want you to go and draw an equilateral triangle facing off of this cylinder. So this is going to be, sprouting out of the cylinder. Make sure you emphasize that you want this to actually be built off the side of the cylinder. So go ahead and draw a little equilateral triangle right over here. And, since it's an equilateral triangle, it's going to be, pretty much already determined where it's going to finish off. So you can actually use that to your advantage. So you don't need to go ahead and make it a bit more confusing with where you want this to end off. So you have it all like that. Now you'll say there's just one more thing, and then we've completed this drawing. I want you to go to the right-hand side of the cylinder, and sprouting out of this side of the cylinder, I want you to draw another cylinder. Now this is going to be a horizontal cylinder. Do you understand? again. And we're going to have the three-dimensional circle part of this cylinder. It's going to be facing in the right direction. So we can imagine how this is going to be sprouting out. You don't need to worry about the other end of the cylinder. It's going to be hidden behind this first cylinder that we drew. Do you understand? You'll say, okay, so go ahead and get started. Just draw that off here. We know that the three-dimensional part is facing over here to the right, and then go ahead and complete the cylinder. And we don't need to worry about the part in this other circular part down here because that is hidden behind the cylinder. So congratulations, we have completed the drawing. You can give them, if you have enough time, if you actually complete the drawing, you can say congratulations. The whole process was successful. They might have questions along the way. Make sure you answer them. And really the part that matters the most is how you approach working in a team. It's really the completing this helps, right? You want to take some of the descriptive terms I used when going through these processes, like how to use the, when you have a circle or having a complicated object and breaking it down, or a three-dimensional object. Those things help, right? Everyone's going to have different drawing skills, so you don't have to really worry about how close it actually was replicated. It really is going to be how you guys work together, which plan you came up to be successful. Were you taking into consideration how the other person was, asking them if the hint you gave was, or the clue you gave was, I keep saying clue or hint. The instruction you gave them was a good one, and if they understood and you were making sure that they were following along at the same pace. That's really what matters. So if you have any questions about this teamwork station, right, or some of the things you can encounter during the teamwork station, make sure you leave a comment below and I'll answer you as soon as possible, and I'll see you guys in the next video.